Now, obviously, you play, guitar, and in your one man band, you've got your hi hat, you've got your bass, and you've got whatever it is that you have this special connection with the stick at the end of it appears to be a Telecaster, and I'm curious as to who came up with that design. But before I even ask you about that, what was the first instrument you learned on? Was it a guitar, or was it drums, or was it something else?
No, I'm not. I'm not a drummer. I can't play real drums. But I started on piano. I played piano for a year, and then started learning the guitar. But yeah, the one man band. What I do is I modify the guitars. And I play with my fingers. I don't use a pick, so I'm able to do the bass lines with my thumbs, and the solos and the chords with my other fingers. And I modify my guitars. I add a pickup there under the bigger strings, and I split my signal. So that pickup goes to an octaver pedal, which gives me the range of a bass guitar, and it goes to a bass amp. The guitar is split, the signal is split in two. And then on the headstock, I have a drumstick there, uh, which has a maraca on the drumstick. And the drumstick hits the cymbal and the hi-hat. And I'm standing up on two pedals, one of them hitting the bass drum and the other one hitting the snare drum.
Now, and I know you mentioned earlier you started playing gigs as a teenager. What did your parents think of the track your life was taking at that point? I mean, were they supportive? Were they like, you got to find a traditional job? What was the mindset
Yeah.
there?
Well, my dad didn't want me to become a musician. Like I had I had good grades until I really got into music, and then everything else just I was not interested in anything else but the guitar as soon as I started playing. And my dad wanted something else for me, and I can totally understand that. It's not necessarily the job that you want your kid to have. And like there's a lot of if you're playing bars, and I was playing with older guys. Like when I was 18, I joined the Bob Harrison Blues Band. They were all around 40 or 45. Bob Harrison had the reputation of being like the guy who drank the most in like Canadian show business, basically.
And
And
for a
they're
Canadian, that's a lot.
yeah. He drank 24 beers a day, and scotch and other things. But they were all very protective of me. Like they took care of me, and they were really nice to me. And but like you don't want your kids to. You'd rather have your kids in college than in bars surrounded by dope dealers. You know,
Yeah.
so
How did the opportunity with the Bob Harrison Blues Band come about?
well, I was playing this club in my hometown. I was still living in Three Rivers at the time, and I was playing there every Thursday, and it was a blues club. And I had the Thursday nights, and on weekends they'd have bands from out of town. And back then, I'm talking about like 1993, the Bob Harrison Blues Band was the most popular blues band in Quebec, and they played there a weekend, and the guitar player couldn't make it, and so the guy needed a guitar player, and somebody told him about me, and they tried me, and after the second show, I got the gig. So the weekend after that, I was in Montreal doing four shows in a row, and a month later, we were playing the Spectrum, which is 1,000 seater. It was sold out, and my life really changed from that moment. And my dad was a fan of Bob Harrison. Whenever Bob Harrison would come to town, he'd go watch the show. So that's when he realized, I guess, that I might have a chance in this business.
You had suddenly had validation.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people here in the States don't know how popular the blues actually is in Canada. I mean, but the Montreal Blues Festival is like world renowned, and there are
The
a
Jazz
lot of
Festival.
there's a lot of blues artists originating in Canada. I mean, why do you think the blues maybe has been so popular in Canada in ways maybe it isn't in other countries outside of the US?
Well, uh, I've toured a lot in Europe and in the UK, and it's very popular there also. In the Netherlands, it's pretty big. In the UK, also in Germany,
Hmm.
uh, uh, There's a great blues scene there, and I've played in Norway. I've played in Denmark. They got amazing blues musicians in Denmark. You wouldn't think of it, but it's not in the charts anywhere, but there's an audience for it pretty much everywhere, and good musicians everywhere. Uh,
So there's a live music demand
there
for it.
there used to be a lot more places to play. When I started out in Montreal, just on one street, you had 8 blues clubs, and you could make a living, just playing on that street, like two blocks, But now it's different. But like here, I do theaters. I don't play the bars anymore in Quebec. I still do. I still play the bars when I play in Western Canada, but they have a great bar scene there. Like in Calgary, they got some really nice blues venues. Saskatoon too. So there's places to play. You just got to be you just got to love to drive, because sometimes you got to drive for 8 hours between every cities, So
How did it feel to be working with somebody from Offenbach, which I imagine was a band you were rather familiar with
yeah,
at
well,
that point?
Offenbach. The thing about Offenbach is that they were legends,
Yeah.
and they were the only French Canadian rock band that sounded just as good as American bands. And some of their songs will last forever. So I was already a fan. I was listening to Offenbach records, and then by playing with Bob, who had played drums in Offenbach, I got to play with everybody who played in the band back when they were together, except Jerry Boulet, who had died by then. But I got to play with all the other guys, and I got to hang out with these guys, and it was great for a kid like me, to be surrounded by all these legendary Quebec musicians. And at the same time, we were opening for a lot of American bands. Whenever, like the Fabulous Thunderbirds or Albert Collins or Buddy Guy or all the big American blues bands, whenever they'd come to town, I'd be opening for them or backing them up. For a while, like I'd get a lot of calls to back these guys because they'd fly in without a band and we'd bag them. So I played with Hubert Sumlin, one of my heroes, who was Howlin' Wolf's guitar player,
Yeah.
and I got to meet a lot of these guys. So, I dropped out of school to do that, but I was still at school and I was learning a lot, by being surrounded by all these incredible musicians with experience.
How soon into your professional career did you realize that you may or that you wanted to go solo?
I've always known that I wanted to go solo. I played with Bob for 2.5 years, and then I basically stole the band. But we were already doing shows on the side under my name. We were called the Steve Hill Band, but I had Sam Harrison on drums, Bob's nephew, and he was in Bob's band, and so we decided to leave and start our own band with Mark Deschain on bass, and we did that for a couple of years. And I was doing the booking myself. I was like 21, 22 years old, and we'd do like 200 shows a year. And then at 23, I released my first album, and then 2 years later, the second one, and so I've always known that I wanted to do my things. I don't think I was much of a singer back then on my first couple of records. I knew my way around a guitar. I think I was a really good guitar player at an early age, but I was not a songwriter and a singer yet. That took some time. I think, to me, the first album that I really consider myself being a songwriter and a good singer on is my fourth album, Devil at My Heels, which came out in 2007.
Well, the evolution of your music and style from like solo artist to one man band and then kind of back to solo artist and then kind of back to one man band is really incredible. And it's interesting to me how so many of the links in the chain were seemingly either like happy accidents or luck or fate, as some might say,
Yeah.
and I appreciate you kind of walking us through how that evolved, because I think there are a lot of people who didn't, who are catching on to you now, who maybe didn't realize that evolution and those steps